But these principles are now under attack. They're under a vicious attack by an administration that has no respect for the rule of law, and they're under attack by an insidious process of corrosion that has been my misery to observe as a practicing lawyer for the last 20 years. We now no longer have in public policy what I even recognize as law. Law ought to be that you can look something up and you can see, yes, this is legal, or no, this is not legal. And now we have some different process. We have a bunch of lobbyists go in a back room, and we have them come up with 2,700 pages of language, and we have these meat puppets who go to the legislature and they're too lazy to read it, and we have other meat puppets who have to tell us, oh, you've got to vote for it so you can find out what's in it. And then they vote for it. And what's in it? 149 times. Well, the secretary shall do this, and the secretary shall do that, and consider these 15 factors, and do this in the public interest, and do whatever you want, because we don't believe in the rule of law anymore. We believe in czars. That's why Nancy Pelosi's hairdresser can get an exemption from complying with insurance, but a company that's run by Republicans can't. That's why when they closed Chrysler dealers, the Republican dealers lost their dealerships and the Democrats didn't. That's why the Indiana Public Utilities, Public Employees Union, the pensioners who had the GM bonds, the answer was, screw you. We don't care if it's a secured bond. We're going to give the money to the unions instead. And to my shame and horror, our courts have not put a stop to this at all. We are losing the whole ball game here. We are losing property rights. We are losing the rule of law. And that, as Attorney General, is the thing I care about more than anything. Now, it's difficult. It's difficult to explain these things. In part, it's difficult to explain these things because we have a very large class of people whose salary and income depends on not understanding these things. They can't understand that we have cancer, and the cancer is government. We have cells and cells multiplying and turning into these tumors that are choking the life out of the economy. Now, as I go around the state, I'm trying to explain this in terms that everybody can understand and everybody can agree with, unless they happen to be employed by the government. And I want to offer you, in the very brief amount of time I have tonight, 3 principles that I think you can sell to anyone. Principle number 1, decentralization. Everybody knows that it doesn't make sense to have 3 or 4 or 5 different levels of government and different agencies in charge of the same thing. Everybody knows that this doesn't work. Everybody knows that they sit around and they coordinate with each other, and they have meetings, and they write reports, and they hire consultants to facilitate between themselves. I'm driving down I-5 this morning through this thick haze from the forest fires, and when they come on the radio to talk about the forest fires, they don't talk about how they're putting the forest fire out. They talk about how the agencies are having a very good coordination session to address the problem, because that's what's important to them, having meeting after meeting after meeting. And I've done this stuff my whole life. I've litigated in the context of salmon recovery, where there are 13 agencies in charge of salmon recovery. And on my wall, I used to have 40,000 pages of reports that they would write this plan and this intercoordination report, and jibber, jabber, jibber, jabber. You know what? It costs 10 times as much now to do things as it used to. And I don't make these numbers up. You can look it up. You can go look up how much did it cost to build the Holland Tunnel or the Golden Gate Bridge or something like that, and then you inflate it for the fact that we have this crazed agency depreciating our money like crazy, and you see that right now we have to pay 10 times as much just to get the same amount of concrete on the roadway, because we have agency after agency with standards and complexity. Everybody knows this is a problem. Everybody knows it doesn't work. Everybody knows that you can't make policy sensibly if you're sitting in some bureaucratic building 2,000 or 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. You can't know how to fight a fire in Burns. That's where we get these rules like, oh, we can't use chainsaws or bulldozers to fight fires because that would interfere with the wilderness character of the area. We'd rather burn the place to the ground instead. I tell you what effective forest fire fighting is. It's what the Indians do up in Washington State. They've got a forest. When it caught on fire, they sent their people to cut the trees down so fast that the logs were arriving at the mill still on fire. That's effective forest fire. Now, what can the Attorney General do about this? Well, he needs help. he needs help from the legislature, and he needs help from the county commissioners, and he needs people who are willing to stand up to the federal government and say, we are a sovereign state. We have the police power to protect the health and welfare of our citizens. And we will do that by passing ordinances and statutes that say if you're a large landowner whose initials happen to be USFS, or really anything else, and you are letting these gigantic fuel loads build up, that are going to burn up and burn down our houses and burn down our private forests and fill the air with stuff that gives us asthma and cancer, we are going to fight to defend our health and welfare, and we are going to cut and clean up that stuff ourselves. And then we need a county sheriff who's willing to say, when the Forest Service says, well, if you send your contractors in there, we'll arrest them. We need the county sheriff to say, if you arrest them, we'll arrest you. And then we have to fight. We have to go out to the Supreme Court if that's what it takes. Because I tell you what, a freed slave or an escaped slave, I can never remember which, Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a struggle. It never has and it never will. And we have, for decade after decade, watched the power in this country go higher and higher to some corrupt bunch of people who can't be bothered to even read the laws that they're passing and saddle us with this garbage over and over again. And they're not going to give it up unless we fight against them and unless we elect people with the spine to fight against them. Crop of candidates than we have ever had before, as far as I can tell, because we have people who are getting angry, like me, at what is going on and who are willing to fight. Now, what's the next principle I want to talk about? How about simplification? Is there anybody in the state of Oregon who can't recognize that the government has become too complicated? That they have 50 pages of rules where 10 pages of rules will do? You might remember 50 years ago, you had a forest ranger, and the forest ranger was in charge of a district. And if it was time for a timber sale, he would meet with the company and put out the bids, and then they'd have the sale. And if you had a good ranger, it got cleaned up afterwards, and if you had a bad ranger, it didn't. But now, you have 50 or 60 specialists who all get paid $100,000 a year to engage in something that the Forest Service calls process points. There are 780 process points for a decision to cut a single tree, practically. And as a result, nothing can be decided. Everybody knows it's too complex. Everybody knows this in their personal life, too. If you want to do anything, you want to open a little convenience store, there's 12 different state and federal agencies you've got to deal with. And each one has rules this thick. And if you actually were able to read them all and try and comply with them all, you'd spend a full-time job reading these single-spaced things with little things like Section 4842, subsection A14B, little stroke 5, you know. And then, what happens? You can't keep all that stuff in your head. So now you're afraid. Now you're afraid because you might be breaking the law. And I tell you what, you probably are. I'm a lawyer. People come to my office every day. And I can look at each one of you. I can look into your financial history or your business history or something like that, and I'll find some place where you're violating the law. And so now everybody's afraid. Everybody's a little afraid of the government. Everybody's a little afraid to stand up. This is how tyranny develops. This is the direction we've been going in. And this is something nobody likes. One more point, accountability. The people of this country are crying out for accountability from the highest levels on down. We see these corrupt people like the senators, Senator Corzine from New Jersey, he's running a futures company, $1 billion worth of his clients' money, segregated funds, absolutely illegal to touch it. Poof, it's gone. Shows up in the newspaper. JC said it was okay to move it. You know, nobody can be prosecuted. Nothing happens. We have these crooked firms that are out selling garbage to hapless individuals on one side and betting against them on the other. No, nobody can see anything wrong with that either. Here in this state, we have project after project and people after people, no matter what they do, whether it's the underage boys, or the underage girls, or the 4% secret kickbacks or whatever, nobody is ever held accountable, and people are sick and tired of that. And that is something that, as an Attorney General, I can do something about.
All right.
I need your help. I am blessed with an opponent who is an extremist. She is an extremist because she is a puppet of the public employees unions. She is so much of a puppet of the employee unions that her motto could be that she is against government accountability. And even though she has been appointed the interim attorney general for only about 2 months, she's already made some howlingly bad decisions, and I'll tell you about a couple of them. Do any of you remember the young woman who put in a tax return saying, I made $3 million, I made a $2 million tax return? You know that story? And then, poof, there it is, debit card, she loses it, she gets another one, she loses it again. Finally, someone wakes up at the TurboTax company, calls up the Oregon Department of Revenue, says, what are you people doing? Are you idiotic or something? And the Department of Revenue, oh yeah, that doesn't make much sense, and poof, they get her, okay? So what went wrong? Well, they issue this report full of bureaucratic jibber-jabber, which I read to say, yes, our computer kicked out the return, and we need to fix that because it's kicking out returns, and we'll just turn those flags off so these nasty little things don't come to our attention anymore, because when they do, then we've got 4 layers of management who are too lazy to read them, and we'd rather just not know about it at all. But so the Oregonian gets this report that says, well, we'd like to know what's going on. Let's make a request under the Public Records Act. And our Attorney General says, it's not in the public interest for you to know who did it, and it's not in the public interest for you to know what they did. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Nothing to see here. Move along. You're just a taxpayer. Bend over and take it again. There are other aspects of my opponent that merit public notice, and I'll tell you one more story because I think I'm running out of time. And that is that there's a certain class of people who love criminals. And I don't know why this is, but this woman is sort of utterly incapable of punishing crime, and she served on the Court of Appeals. The gentleman there talking about the judges on the Court of Appeals, this is a vital thing because very bad things happen. Up in Benton County, there was this pervert working at a nursing home for an elderly woman with Alzheimer's, and he's convicted of 21 counts of things that you can imagine, which I will not describe in detail because there are children in the audience. This case comes before my opponent in her capacity as a Court of Appeals judge, and she says, it's not enough that he seemed to be staying there all night for no apparent reason because he didn't even have a shift. It's not enough that the women were acting a little funny around him. It's not enough that he admitted strange things to his co-workers. It's not enough that he confessed to the crime to the police. It's not enough that they taped the telephone calls in jail and he admitted that he did these things to his own relatives. No, there's not enough evidence here because the women can't testify because they have Alzheimer's, so let's let him go free. This is the judgment we have as the Attorney General of Oregon right now, and I need your help to change that. Now, I can't do this myself. There is a news blackout in this. This story I just told you, her opponent in the primary tried to bring it out. The television stations all came down, they interviewed the prosecutor, they interviewed the victim's relatives, prepared the story, poof, it was gone. The other people who called on it, all gone. The only way we can get the truth out in this country anymore is from people like you telling your friends and neighbors. I have a website that has this stuff on it. I have the judicial opinions on the website. We have a Facebook page. We have the tools for these stories to be spread, but we need your help to do it. We need you to tell people what's going on. We need you to put up signs. You can even give me money. I'll put these stories on the radio if I get enough of it, and we will prevail. We've got the greatest slate of statewide candidates I've seen in a long time. You want to elect Newt Buehler to go out there and audit these agencies until their ears bleed, and he can send me the audit reports, and I will send the people up the river afterwards. Yeah.